There's no such thing as a painless lesson. They just don't exist. Sacrifices are necessary. You can't gain anything without losing something first. Although, if you can endure that pain and walk away from it, you'll find that you now have a heart strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Yeah, a heart made full metal.
A series known for constantly being at the top of my anime list. A series known as the king of shonen amongst the grand majority who have seen it. A series known for being one of the most consistent and complex anime and manga of all time. Fullmetal Alchemist has it all. In 2001, Arakawa birthed one of the most renowned series of the 2000s decade, a steampunk manga styled in a fictionalized rendition of the Industrial Revolution set in the 20th century. Within this world, alchemy is in control of everything. It's the science of analyzing, deconstructing, and reconstructing matter. The practice has rules and laws that must be followed, and when they're not, the consequences are life-threatening and detrimental, which was the case for Edward and Alphonse Elric, when they attempted to resurrect their deceased mother, resulting in Ed losing his left leg as well as his right arm, and Alphonse losing his body, and being soul-bound to a steel armored suit. But in order to understand why this occurred, it's crucial to understand what alchemy is and what alchemists do. Like previously stated, there are three basics to alchemy and performing transmutation: analyzing, deconstructing, and reconstructing matter. These three basics are what allow for transmutation. One must understand the structure of materials that are going to be transmuted, including the balance of kinetic and potential energy. But before a transmutation can occur, something known as a transmutation circle is necessary. The circle itself functions as a channel for directing and regulating the flow of power, assessing the energies present in the earth and material substances. A transmutation circle is required for all alchemical transmutations. They can be drawn with blood, etched in dirt, pen, pencil, ink, whatever the case may be, but select alchemists possessing a deeper insight into alchemy have demonstrated the capability to transmute merely by clasping their hands together, employing their hand connection as a symbolic circle. This skill appears exclusive to those who have encountered the gate, which we'll get into later. When energy is being exerted to break down the structure of the material into a more malleable state so that it is easier to become reshaped, then the broken down and deconstructed materials are reformed into a new form in which the alchemist has settled upon. One must understand the chemistry behind alchemy in order to perform transmutations and comprehend the elements within the materials being transmuted. Alchemists can use the classical elements such as water, earth, fire, and air, but they can also use the essential principles: salt, sulfur, and mercury. But regardless of the way they go about using their alchemy, the essential foundation lies within the law of conservation of mass, which asserts that energy and matter cannot emerge from nothingness nor be broken down into elemental non-existence, and the law of natural providence, which asserts that an object or substance composed of a specific element or material can solely undergo transmutation into another object possessing comparable composition and characteristics. But in simple terms, something cannot be created from nothing, and that in order to create something, something of equal value must be exchanged and lost. The law of equivalent exchange. The laws of alchemy are really simple. Do not transmute gold. Do not act against the government. These rules stem from the government itself in order to remain protected as well as to keep the economy balanced. But there is one more law of alchemy that comes as a natural law, a taboo that is forbidden. Do not attempt human transmutation. But for these two young brothers, Edward and Alphonse Elric, the law against human transmutation was not apparent to them. That key moment, that essential mistake, the idea of two young boys just wishing to see their mother alive once more, is what created the Fullmetal Alchemist series. During the commencement of the series, we're introduced to Ed and Al, several years after they attempted human transmutation. We're shown someone by the name of Father Cornello, the supposed emissary of the sun god Leto, as all the residents surrounding the area begin to praise him for his miracles and his demonstration of the way of God. Ed, however, doesn't seem to care for religion and more so aligns with the view of an agnostic. Even throughout his conversation with Rose, someone who lives by the word of Letoism, he exclaims that scientists have tried to complete human transmutation for years, but none have succeeded. But trying countlessly and effortlessly is worth more than simply just praying and waiting. After it's revealed that Father Cornello isn't some sort of god and that he's just using alchemy, more specifically, the use of a philosopher's stone, Ed and Al choose to put an end to his lies and try to take the stone for themselves, as they believe that obtaining it is the only way to restore their bodies to their original state. But the stone was fake. Another dead end. Before leaving and continuing their journey, they tell a distraught and heartbroken Rose to get up and move on, as she has two perfectly good legs to walk on, unlike the brothers who defied God and were punished for it. Ed and Al are constantly searching for a way in order to restore their bodies back to their original state. Searching for a real Philosopher's Stone is the only way they think they can succeed. Through Colonel Roy Mustang, they meet Shao Tucker, someone who has successfully transmuted a talking chimera and obtained a license, being named the Life-Binding Alchemist. Tucker got his license 2 years ago after transmuting a chimera, funnily enough around the same time his wife left him, his daughter, and their dog. When the Elric brothers returned to Tucker's home, what they saw had changed their lives forever. Shao Tucker had transmuted his daughter and dog into one chimera, sacrificing their lives for a chance to keep his license. He had such little care for human life that he killed his own daughter, just to succeed in his own selfish ways. But isn't this the same as what Ed and Al did? Their deformed bodies are the result of toying with human lives the same way Tucker describes. They saw a possibility and took it. Shao Tucker is used as a representation of the negative side of alchemy, the science that's known for its wondrous abilities and the power to help people. But the other side of this is the damage it causes and what it can take away from others. This dichotomy within the world also comes with contradictions and irony. Scar is a prime example of this. He lives through the name of God, and as an Ishvalan, this is one of their ways of life. Since the Ishvalan Civil War, the Ishvalans have hated Amestris for their involvement and the damage they had caused, causing Scar to act out of revenge. But since alchemy defies God's existence and rules, Scar wishes to kill all national alchemists working for the state military, but he himself uses alchemy, but stops at the deconstruction phase. Rather than transmuting what he touches, he merely breaks it down into its basic elements, utterly destroying the object. His entire life, even down to the exact use of his alchemy, has been tainted and controlled by that of destruction, which emphasizes just the beginning of the themes of war and its consequences that Fullmetal Alchemist presents. But all this talk about war and violence is making me realize that deep down, Fullmetal Alchemist is a shonen, and one that truly expresses the definition of the demographic. It's an action-packed adventure series, but also comedic whenever it needs to be. The added scenes of Ed randomly crying whenever he gets called small, or even moments where the brothers get embarrassed and the artwork becomes all lined and strict, it's all balanced and creates for a series that screams shonen and expresses what the genre truly is. Although, when the going gets tough and the serious aspects of shonen need to shine, the series knows what to do. When Al starts to consider that maybe he was never really human, and that the existence of an Alphonse Elric was never really true, he loses his mind on Ed and reminds him that he never wanted this body. He doesn't know how Ed feels about their bodies. Ed blames himself for everything that happened. He blames himself for Al not being able to eat, feel, and sleep. Ed won't ever forgive himself for costing Al his human form, but will stop at nothing to achieve the Philosopher's Stone and regain their original bodies. Showcasing the internal struggle of each of the Elric brothers respectively this early in the series is something to note because it emphasizes how truly selfless they are. Despite Ed coming off as arrogant at times, deep down, he empathizes with so many people he encounters that are experiencing tragedy and loss, as he can't help but support them in any way he can. The brothers have experienced misfortune and bloodshed their whole lives, and especially at a young age. Fullmetal Alchemist expresses the cruel reality of the world towards anyone, even the nicest of people. Lieutenant Colonel Mace Hughes represents this perfectly. One of the most genuine characters within the series with the kindest soul can't even escape the cruel fate of the world. And this really pulls on our heartstrings, seeing Envy murder a character who did nothing but love and support the people around him. It just goes to show you that in this world, even the best people meet their ends. Even bringing Colonel Mustang to tears, a character who we've always seen as stoic and expressionless, cried at the loss of his dear friend, who did nothing to deserve this fate. The series constantly pushes forward the idea of the value of a life and the importance of understanding humanity. Ed and Al have made the grave mistake of toying with human lives, and dealt with the consequences of such. They didn't fully grasp that anything that's alive one day will die and return to the earth, which in turn makes the flowers and grass grow. In the same way, our souls become nourishment for the people around us, and live on through the memories of those we loved. Everything in this world has a flow, even human lives. And after speaking with their teacher Izumi, this beautiful lesson is understood tenfold. They were just kids wishing to see their mother smile again, but it was her time. Everyone has their time. From a universal perspective, whether we live or die doesn't matter. The world will keep going as if nothing happened. The world has a flow. People are born and die every day. That's just the way it goes. But accepting that we can't change that fact will allow us to accept death for what it is, fate. But by no means does that entail that we don't matter. We are a part of the whole, the world, the universe. It's created from all the tiny parts, us, that come together to create it. Every life matters, and every life that ends matters. We're the one in the all. Sometime later, we are introduced to the majority of the homunculi in which serve as the main antagonistic group that pose a direct threat to our protagonist in lust, gluttony, envy, greed, sloth, wrath, and later on, pride. These 7 deadly sins were created by fusing parts of a philosopher's stone as well as the main antagonist, Father's, supposed natural flaws, leaving him nearly emotionless. These homunculi are seeking philosopher's stones, either for their own desires such as immortality or to fulfill Father's orders of creating the stones in order to grant him more power and energy to become a perfect godlike being. This idea, as well as the homunculus themselves, become much more prevalent later on, besides lust, as at this time she had already been killed in an ironic fashion, as she was incinerated to death by Roy Mustang, a notorious womanizer who lusts after the position of the Führer of a mistress. As the series continues and our main cast undergo emotional and physical trauma, their ideals only strengthen and their goals are only pushed tenfold, especially Edward's ideals, as he sets on continually moving forward in hopes of protecting others and getting back his own as well as his brother's body. But when he goes to visit his mother's grave, he is faced with his father, von Hohenheim. Ed freaks out, cursing his father's name and forbidding him from visiting the gravesite ever again. His father had left their family, which forced the burden of parenthood solely on the Elric brothers' mother, Trisha. With her battling an illness at the same time, it was too much for her body to handle, pushing her to death. Ed detests his father for leaving them, but more importantly, leaving their mother to die, with no help. Ed speaks about what his father did to his mother as well as Alphonse, but doesn't talk about himself. He's painted as an arrogant little guy from the start of the series, but as time goes on, we see how he develops the sense of care for everyone around him besides himself. He doesn't care if he doesn't regain his body, as long as Alphonse does, he'll be happy. And even when he digs up his supposed mother's grave from the transmutation he and his brother had attempted years prior, which reveals that it wasn't truly his mother that came back to life briefly, he realized that whatever he had brought back had a life. It moved, it looked at him. He gave what he described as a human being a life, and albeit a short one, he gave it a life and watched it die as a human, and it deserved to be treated as such in his eyes. His idea of humanity has been tainted ever since Al had lost his body. He can't just value a being with flesh as all that is composed of a human being, because that would devalue Al's existence, as his current state is without being, without flesh, and without arguably everything that would make up a human being. But we know that Al is a human, and so does Ed, which has shifted his understanding and values regarding humanity. The more the brothers speak about their trauma and the events they've experienced that have led them to their current life, the more they understand one another and how they really feel. We know Ed blames himself for everything that he and Al have gone through regarding the human transmutation attempt and the loss of their bodies, but Al blames himself too. He doesn't want Ed to carry this burden all on his own, because he's just as guilty for making the choice to try and bring their mother back to life. He doesn't want to regain his body back if it means that other people are going to get hurt because of it, like Hughes did. He has experienced firsthand people, the homunculi, who aren't necessarily humans, who have found their own meaning through their existence just by simply living, and Al realizes that he can still live a full life. His body is a ticking time bomb. He could lose connection to his soul any second, but isn't this the same as humans? Humans can die whenever, unexpectedly, but they continue to live on despite this, just as Al exclaims, before the brothers vow to take down truth and take back Al's original body from that place without losing anyone else's lives. Burdens and trauma are no surprise within Fullmetal Alchemist though. Winry never knew how her parents truly died. She always wondered what really happened to them in the Civil War, but when she found out that Scar was the one that murdered them after they came to his aid and saved his life after he was injured, Winry was distraught. She wanted revenge, she wanted vengeance, she wanted to kill him the same way he killed her parents, but she couldn't do it, and she felt weak because of it, until she realized that she was born to save lives, not take them. She has people who count on her, and people who value her life and existence. She understands that through her enduring the pain that Scar had caused her, she had become stronger than ever before. Following this, in the fight between Ed, Lynn, and Envy, Lynn points out something just before Ed transmutes. He looks as if he's praying. In Fullmetal Alchemist, alchemy is shown as a science that manipulates the natural world, essentially granting its users godlike powers. However, Ed's character is and has always been portrayed as a skeptic, someone who relies on reason and scientific understanding rather than faith in a higher power. By using the praying hands gesture to perform alchemy, Ed is symbolically invoking a religious act to wield a power that contradicts traditional religious beliefs. This irony highlights the complex relationship between science, fate, and power within the narrative. This moment showcases Ed's willingness to utilize any means necessary, even those that conflict with his personal beliefs, to achieve his goals and protect those he loves. The use of alchemy is supposed to bring about a means of happiness, peace and help to people. But during the Ishvalan Civil War, all of that goes out the window. The state alchemists, Mustang and Armstrong alike, are sent to the front lines to kill any Ishvalan that crosses their path, using their godlike powers. We've seen from the beginning of the series the negative sides of alchemy through Shao Tucker, and the things it can take away from people and the consequences of its use. The same is shown here. Alchemy is being used to take the lives of so many people when at its core, it's supposed to be a means of creation, not destruction, which showcases how even throughout the series' power system, power within the wrong hands can lead to death and destruction. And the same goes for everything else, but specifically guns, in which Ed and Riza have spoken about. A gun is a weapon. It's designed to kill people, but you have the power to either shoot it or not. The same goes with alchemy. You as the user have the choice to use the power for the well-being of mankind or choose to be a murderer. And within the Amestris government, the soldiers didn't really have a choice. They chose to become soldiers to put their lives on the line to protect the people of their land, but within the Civil War, we see that they're forced to commit heinous acts of bloodshed just at the word of King Bradley. People who received the title of State Alchemist because of their unique skills and strength were forced to use their abilities to ravage an entire nation, all at the command of one man. Which explains a lot considering that if we fast forward to the present day, the government hasn't changed one bit. Within the government lies corruption through the organization that Führer King Bradley had put together, as we now know him as Wrath. The government has forced their soldiers to kill thousands of people in the name of justice and righteousness, but everything the government has done and continues to do is the complete opposite, combining their power with the likes of the homunculi under Father's jurisdiction. In the Civil War, Scar had murdered Winry's parents. When faced with him again for a second time, she bears no hatred towards him. She doesn't forgive him, but she understands that holding on to this hatred and desire for vengeance won't lead her anywhere but to continue down a path she wouldn't be happy with, and neither would her parents. She's an engineer, someone who saved the lives of the Elric brothers countless times, and has also helped those in need of automail around her. She understands that she's not a killer. She was born to save lives, and as much as she would want Scar to feel the same pain that he bestowed upon her parents, she knows that they wouldn't want that for her, so she continues to move forward and endure this pain, living a life she can say she's proud of without falling down the path of hatred. Now we enter the promised day. The entirety of Fullmetal Alchemist has accumulated up to this point, and although the series feels like one cohesive story as every single event intertwines into one another, this is what everything has come to, and the arc that defines the entire series. To start, we're met with a shocking twist of Pride, Selim Bradley the homunculus, turning on Gluttony and devouring him. The sin of gluttony is described as excessive eating or drinking beyond reason. The gluttony within Fullmetal Alchemist is shown as innocent and always desiring to eat everyone who he fights, which is ironic considering he is eaten and killed by Pride, someone who is hungry for power. Arakawa had designed each and every death of the homunculi to represent some sort of irony, as if their existence was turning on themselves, but I'll touch on that as we continue on. In a moment that fans of the series were waiting ages for, we see Roy Mustang face off against Envy the homunculus. Envy had taken the life of Maze Hughes, one of Mustang's closest allies and one of the kindest and purest souls within the series. Mustang has been searching for the killer ever since that moment, to inflict the same pain that they had inflicted on Hughes, and the repercussions that were left on his wife and daughter. Mustang wanted revenge for this. He wanted to kill Envy so that Envy would feel the same pain, the pain that Hughes felt. He continues to scorch them, burn them, and incinerate them to the point of near death, but not until Riza and Ed stop him. He wants nothing more but to kill Envy to avenge his fallen comrade, but he knows he can't. As someone who wants to stand at the top of the government in their future and lead them, he can't succumb to this desire, as he would be no better than a murderer and no better than the homunculi themselves. But this isn't the end for Envy's suffering. After being spared, Envy tries to get Ed, Scar, Riza, and Mustang all worked up, saying that they were the Amestrian soldier that started the Civil War, trying to make them turn on one another, pointing out that each of them have caused each other indescribable pain and suffering, and that there should be no way that they could live amongst each other in harmony. But the truth is, Envy's just jealous. Humans are supposed to be so much weaker than homunculi, but no matter how often they get beat down, become discouraged, lose their way, come close to failing, they keep fighting on. And even if they know it's for superficial reasons, they find strength in each other. Envy, not being able to take the embarrassment of Edward sparing their life, and being envious of the likes of humanity, ripped out their own Philosopher's Stone from their body, ultimately ending their life. Continuing the trend of ironic deaths, Sloth had died at the hands of the Armstrongs, as well as Izumi and Sig Curtis, after still moving and persisting in the face of death. Sloth was always slow and used as a bodyguard for Father without any other purpose. Before his death, he showed off his true nature, as the fastest homunculus, but wore himself out and got too tired. During his death, he complained about how living, as well as dying, took too much effort, as he was killed while taking out a task that he was given. During one of the most entertaining fights in the series, in Wrath vs. Scar, we get an intense back and forth of ideals clashing. Scar hated those who used alchemy, as it defied God, but when the fate of his own life and the fate of others was on the line, he remembered the existence of his brother and the techniques and research he had left for him in the form of tattoos, which he used to defeat Wrath, King Bradley. Although the fight was gruesome, Wrath died in a peaceful manner. After his blood-filled battle with Scar where he meets his inevitable end, he's seen dismembered, smiling up at the sun. He accepts death as what it is, and doesn't retort to any hatred nor curses towards Scar, which his wrathful nature would usually suggest. Instead, he monologues, before peacefully accepting his end after an honorable battle to the death. Out of all the homunculi, Pride has, in my opinion, the most ironic death. When the body of Selim Bradley could no longer suffice holding the sin Pride, Kimberly, and the Philosopher's Stone, Pride reaches out to try and steal the human body of Edward Elric, but in doing so, rejects his own pride. Kimberly calls him out for this, and that Pride was willing to sacrifice his inherent existence to escape into a human vessel, one that he previously looked down upon. He even asks him if he has anything to be proud of, a perfect and ironic end to Pride. Although Ed manages to salvage the body of Selim Bradley as a newborn child, just as Kimberly thought, as when Pride exclaimed that Ed was going to kill him, Kimberly stated that Pride clearly doesn't understand the kind of person that Edward Elric is. And by far, the best conclusion to one of the homunculi, greed. Greed, ever since joining the body of Lynn, has been much more prevalent in the story than his previous form. He built real connections with the cast, Ed specifically, but especially Lynn himself. He always wanted to conquer the world. He wanted money, power, and fame, as his sin suggested. He was born out of greed, out of a desire, but in the end, all he wanted was true friends. Having bonds and connections with our cast has made him feel as though he was human, and even in death, he says he doesn't want anything else, and that he's satisfied with his end, and bids his friends of the soul farewell. Throughout the entire series, we've seen Ed make sacrifices for those around him. Ed made the ultimate choice to tie Al's soul to that suit of armor to ensure he stayed alive, and has lived with that burden ever since. Al always saw Ed make sacrifices for those around him, and when he knew that Ed was on the verge of death with a broken automail, Alphonse couldn't let him die, and couldn't let the people around him die either. Alphonse asks if because Ed sacrificed his arm to pull his soul back from that place, if it was possible to reverse it. Alphonse had always put his trust in Ed, and he knows that he won't fail. He sacrifices his own life so that Ed could regain his right arm in order to defeat Father and save everyone. Al doesn't know for sure if he'll ever be able to go back. He doesn't know for sure if Ed will succeed, but he knows his big brother will stop at nothing to save the people he loves and cares about, especially him. Truth explains that Ed is going to have to make another sacrifice in order to retrieve Al from the gate, one that concludes this final moment in the most cathartic way possible. After Ed miraculously regains his right arm, after Al sacrifices himself for the equivalent exchange, Ed beats a pulp out of Father, spiraling him out of control and sending him to the gate. To get Al back, a sacrifice has to be made. Lynn proposes the use of a Philosopher's Stone that he had, but Ed promised Al he'd never use the lives of innocent people for their own needs. His father, Hohenheim, suggested he uses his one single remaining life to bring back Al. Even though he hadn't been a proper father figure to Ed nor Al, Ed refuses and won't let him die for their sake. He looks around and notices all the people that stood beside him during this fight and during his journey to retrieve his and Al's body. Everyone had their own reasons for being where they were, but they all helped the brothers until the very end, so he couldn't take anything else from them, let alone a Philosopher's Stone or even the life of his father. Then, the Fullmetal Alchemist performed his last transmutation. When arriving at the gate, Ed says that the toll he wishes to pay was the portal of truth. His entire life has been built around alchemy ever since he was a child. From the human transmutation him and Al had attempted, to becoming a state alchemist in order to receive top-notch research material to figure out how to regain his brother's body, alchemy has always been a part of him. He's been crowned as the Fullmetal Alchemist, the youngest state alchemist in history, someone with extraordinary abilities. But he was ready to give it all up to save his brother. Truth calls this a fall down to mundane humanity, but Ed has always been a normal human, a helpless one at that. He couldn't even save one girl who was turned into a chimera. It's a hefty toll, but even he knows that without alchemy, he'll still have his friends. A response that Truth was content with. And with the sacrifice of his alchemy being complete, Alphonse had regained his physical body. Everyone had gone their separate ways. Hohenheim had sadly passed away, smiling in front of the grave of his late wife, reminiscing about how throughout his long lifetime that he believed was a burden, he's glad he was able to meet her and spend time with his kids. Scar had been saved once more, and was asked to join the Ishval expedition by Miles to revive the religion and prevent the extinction of his people with his own hands. Scar had found a purpose outside of hatred, and in doing so, has found his place within this world. even if he doesn't believe it. And in a moment that has been anticipated since the dawn of the series, the Elric brothers, bearing a human arm and a human form, greet Winry once more, in one of the most beautiful moments in all of manga. Al sets off to Jing in order to learn purification arts, in order to explore the East and to also find a way to help people who have suffered because of alchemy. Ed sees Winry one last time before he sets off to the west to adventure. He shares his feelings of equivalent exchange with Winry, before eventually hugging her goodbye and continuing on. If there's one thing that Fullmetal Alchemist has taught me, it's that there's no such thing as a painless lesson. They just don't exist. Sacrifices are necessary. You can't gain anything without losing something first. Although, if you can endure that pain and walk away from it, you'll find that you now have a heart strong enough to overcome any obstacle. Yeah, a heart made full metal.